Welcome, everyone. Let me tell you something that most people never find out about themselves. Something that schools don't teach. Something that grades don't measure. Something that standardized tests completely miss. You might be far more intelligent than you have ever been told. Not intelligent in the narrow, limited way the world usually means. Not good at math intelligent, not always has the right answer intelligent, but intelligent in the deep, real human sense. The kind of intelligence that sees patterns others miss. The kind that feels things deeply and thinks things thoroughly. The kind that stays up at night asking questions that have no easy answers. Here is the truth that might hurt and then heal. Most intelligent people spend their lives believing they are not smart enough, because nobody ever showed them what real intelligence actually looks like. And so they compare themselves to others. They feel too slow, or too sensitive, or too strange. They hide their thoughts because they worry no one will understand. Today, I want to change that. In the next 45 minutes, I am going to share with you 10 signs, 10 real research-supported signs that you are more intelligent than you think. Not to flatter you, to help you finally see yourself clearly. Please listen until the end, because one of these signs might be the thing you have been waiting your whole life to hear.
Now, I want to be clear about something from the beginning. This is not a list of tricks. This is not 10 ways to feel better about yourself for 5 minutes. Each sign we explore today is rooted in real psychology, in decades of research on how brilliant minds actually work. And each one is told through a story of someone who had the sign without knowing it, who doubted themselves, who struggled, and who eventually understood, I was never the problem. I call these 10 signs the genius signals. 10 quiet, often hidden markers of a mind that works in extraordinary ways. You will recognize yourself in some of these, maybe in many. And if you care about understanding your own mind, building confidence in your own thinking, and learning rich, natural English at the same time, subscribe to our channel right now, because this is exactly what we do here. Now, let us begin.
Chapter 1. The Hidden Mind. Before we reach the 10 signs, I need to tell you something important. Something that explains why so many brilliant people feel so ordinary. There is a well-known psychological phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect. You may have heard of it. It describes the strange fact that people with limited knowledge often feel very confident in what they know, while people with deep knowledge often feel uncertain, because the more you understand, the more clearly you see everything you don't yet understand. In other words, the smarter you are, the more likely you are to doubt yourself. This is not weakness. This is one of the truest signs of genuine intelligence. Let me tell you about a young woman named Ilara. Ilara was 17 years old. She sat in the back of her classroom, always quiet. While other students raised their hands quickly, Ilara would hold her answer inside, turning it over, examining it from every angle, looking for the flaw before she spoke. Her teachers sometimes misread her silence as confusion, Her classmates sometimes thought she wasn't paying attention. But inside Ilara's mind, something extraordinary was happening. She was not lost. She was thinking, deeply, carefully, completely. She would consider the question from the teacher's perspective. She would imagine what would happen if the answer was wrong. She would connect the question to 3 other ideas she had read last week. And by the time she was ready to speak, the class had already moved on. Ilara grew up believing she was slow. She was not slow. She was thorough. And thoroughness, that careful, complete, layered way of thinking, is one of the oldest and truest signs of a genuinely gifted mind. You are not the student who doesn't understand. You are the student who refuses to pretend they understand when they don't. That is not weakness. That is intellectual honesty. And intellectual honesty is the foundation of all real intelligence. Now, let us look at the 10 signs.
Sign number 1. You ask why more than most people. The first sign of genuine intelligence is one of the simplest, but it is also one of the rarest. You are not satisfied with surface answers. When someone tells you how something works, your mind immediately asks, but why does it work that way? When you read a fact, you want to know where it came from. When you hear a rule, you want to understand the reason behind it. Most people accept the surface. You want the depth. Let me tell you about a boy named Oren. Oren was 8 years old. He drove his parents a little bit crazy because he never stopped asking why. Why does the sun look orange at sunset? Why do people say fine when they don't mean it? Why does sadness feel heavy? His parents would answer each question, and Oren would wait 1 second, just 1 second, and then ask, but why? Some adults found this exhausting. One teacher, though, a quiet man named Mr. Halverson, saw it differently. He stayed after class one afternoon and said to Oren, "You know, in ancient Greece there was a man who did what you do. He walked through the city asking everyone why. They named his method after him. They called it the Socratic method. And we still teach it today, 2,500 years later." Oren didn't fully understand, but he understood enough. He understood, my questions are not a problem. They are a gift.
If you are someone who cannot stop asking why, who feels unsatisfied with easy answers, that is not stubbornness. That is one of the most powerful signs of an inquiring mind. Sign number 2, you talk to yourself. This one surprises people and sometimes embarrasses them, but research published in the journal Acta Psychologica has shown that people who speak to themselves, either out loud or silently in detailed inner dialogue, perform better on cognitive tasks. Speaking to yourself helps you organize your thoughts, solve problems more systematically, and regulate your emotions more effectively. It is not a sign of eccentricity. It is a sign that your mind is actively processing, that you are engaged in a genuine conversation with your own intelligence. Let me tell you about a woman named Rosa. Rosa was an architect. She was brilliant at her work, but she had one habit that made her colleagues smile.
When she was designing something complex, she would walk slowly around her desk and murmur to herself, "If the weight goes here, then the pressure moves there. But wait, what happens to the light? If the wall is here, the light shifts." Her colleague Dario once asked her about it. "Are you talking to yourself?" Rosa looked up. "Isn't everyone?" Dario laughed, but he thought about it later, and he realized, no, not everyone, not the way Rosa does. Rosa's inner voice was a collaborator, a thinking partner, a way of making the invisible visible, of taking the complex architecture of her mind and walking through it out loud.
If you talk to yourself, embrace it. You are not strange. You are processing. And deep processing is one of the hallmarks of a powerful mind. Sign number 3. You feel things deeply. Here is one that many intelligent people are told to be ashamed of. You feel things very deeply. You are moved by music in ways that seem disproportionate. You feel the mood of a room when you walk in. You carry the weight of things that happened days ago. You feel other people's pain as if it were your own. People have perhaps told you you're too sensitive. You overthink things. You need to toughen up. But research on what psychologist Elaine Aron calls the highly sensitive person and what neuroscientist Antonio Damasio calls somatic intelligence suggests that deep emotional sensitivity is strongly correlated with complex cognitive processing. In other words, the people who feel the most deeply are often the ones who think the most deeply. Emotion and intelligence are not opposites. In the most gifted minds, they work together. Let me tell you about a man named Stefan. Stefan was a writer. He had won awards. People respected his work. But in his personal life, he was often told he was too much, too intense, too emotional, too affected by small things. A difficult conversation could stay with him for 3 days. A beautiful piece of music could bring him to tears without warning. Reading about suffering in another country could ruin his sleep. One evening, talking to an older writer he admired, Stefan confessed that he sometimes wished he could feel less. "It's exhausting," he said, "to feel everything so much." The older writer was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Stefan, every word you have ever written that was true, every sentence that made someone cry or feel less alone, came from exactly that, from feeling everything so much. Your sensitivity is not your weakness, it is your instrument." Do not let the world convince you that feeling deeply is a flaw. It is a feature, and it is sign number 3. Sign number 4. You prefer to be alone with your thoughts. If you are someone who needs solitude, who finds silence nourishing instead of uncomfortable, who does some of your best thinking when you are alone, this is not antisocial behavior. This is a sign that your inner world is rich enough to live in. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who studied creative geniuses across many fields, found that solitude was one of the most consistent traits among the most brilliant people he studied. Not loneliness, chosen solitude. The ability to be comfortable, even joyful, in one's own company. The ability to turn inward and find there a landscape worth exploring. Let me tell you about a woman named Nadia. Nadia worked in a busy marketing agency. She was good at her job. But every Friday afternoon, she would take a long walk alone, sometimes 2 hours, through the park near her apartment.
No podcast, no music, no phone calls, just her thoughts and the sound of the city in the distance. Her friends teased her, "You need a walking partner, Nadia." But Nadia knew something they didn't. Those walks were where her best ideas lived. Those walks were where she solved problems she'd been unable to crack at her desk. Those walks were where she understood herself, her real opinions, her real feelings, her real direction. She did not walk alone because she lacked company. She walked alone because inside her own mind she had the best company in the world. Solitude is not emptiness. For a rich mind, solitude is a workshop.
Sign number 5. You notice things other people miss. Do you walk into a room and immediately sense the tension between two people before a word is spoken? Do you read a sentence and notice an inconsistency that everyone else accepted without question? Do you look at a situation and see immediately and intuitively a solution that nobody else seemed to consider? This is called pattern recognition, and it is one of the most reliable markers of high intelligence. The human brain is a pattern-seeking machine, but some brains seek patterns more deeply, more quickly, more accurately. They see connections across different fields. They notice what is absent as much as what is present. They feel when something is not quite right, even before they can explain why. Let me tell you about a man named Luca. Luca was a translator. He worked with legal documents, long, complex contracts in 3 languages. His colleagues were all competent, but Luca had a reputation. He could read a contract once, just once, and say, "Something is wrong on page 7." And 9 times out of 10, he was right. Not because he was trying, but because his mind was tuned to notice when the pattern of language shifted, when a sentence structure changed, when a word was used differently than it should be. His supervisor once asked him, "How do you catch these things, Luca? What's your method?" Luca thought about it honestly. "I don't have a method," he said. "It just doesn't feel right, like a wrong note in music." That intuitive pattern recognition, that almost musical sense of rightness and wrongness, is one of the quietest and most powerful forms of intelligence that exists. We are halfway through our 10 signs, and I hope you have already recognized yourself in at least one of them. If you have, if something here has made you think, "Wait, that's me. I do that," please like this video right now and leave a comment below. Tell me, which sign do you recognize most in yourself so far? The constant why questions? Talking to yourself? Feeling things deeply? Loving solitude? Or noticing what others miss? Your comment means everything to me, and it helps more people who need this story find it. Now, let's continue. Signs 6 through 10 are waiting, and they might be the most surprising ones of all. Sign number 6. You struggle with indecision, but your final decisions are excellent. Here's a paradox that confuses many intelligent people. You find it very difficult to make small decisions: what to eat, what to watch, which route to take. You consider every option. You weigh every consequence. You change your mind 3 times before finally choosing. And yet, when it truly matters, when the decision is big and important and real, your instincts are almost always right. Why does this happen? Because your brain processes at a high level of detail. It does not skip steps. It does not accept the first answer. It runs the simulation fully, every time. For small decisions, this depth is excessive. It creates friction where none is needed. But for large, complex, consequential decisions, that deep processing is exactly what is required.
And while others decide quickly and later regret, you take time and you get it right.
Let me tell you about a woman named Claire. Claire was a product designer. She took 45 minutes to choose lunch from a menu. Her team laughed about it, warmly. But when the company needed to make a major decision, whether to launch a product or delay it, they always asked Claire last. Not because her opinion didn't matter, because they had learned her opinion was the one that mattered most. She would sit quietly for a moment. She would ask 3 or 4 questions that nobody else had thought to ask, and then she would say, carefully, "I think we should wait, because if you look at the pattern from 2 years ago, and you consider what happened in the market last spring, there is a timing issue here that hasn't been discussed." She had been right every single time. Claire's indecision at lunch was the price of her extraordinary clarity on the things that genuinely counted. Sign number 7. You have a dark or unusual sense of humor. This one is perhaps surprising, but the research behind it is fascinating. A study published in the journal Cognitive Processing found a strong link between high intelligence and an appreciation for complex, dark, or absurdist humor. Why? Because this kind of humor requires the mind to hold 2 contradictory ideas at the same time, to find the tension between them, to understand the gap between what is expected and what actually is, and to laugh at that gap. That is a cognitively sophisticated act. People who find simple, obvious humor funny do not need to work very hard. People who appreciate the strange, the ironic, the dark, the unexpected, their brains are running a more complex process.
Let me tell you about a man named Felix. Felix was an emergency room doctor. His work was serious, sometimes heartbreaking. He dealt with pain and fear and urgency every single day. And yet, in the break room, among his colleagues, Felix was known for making people laugh. Not with obvious jokes, with small, quiet, strange observations. The kind that made you laugh and then immediately feel slightly guilty about laughing. Notice how the hospital is always coldest in the places where people are most anxious? The waiting room is freezing. The cafeteria is warm. Somewhere in this building there is a thermostat operated by irony. His colleagues laughed and then thought, he's not wrong. Felix's humor was not escape. It was a form of processing, of seeing the world's contradictions clearly and finding in that clarity something almost beautiful. Sign number 8. You have difficulty finishing things. Wait, I know what you're thinking. How is not finishing things a sign of intelligence? Let me explain. The minds of genuinely curious, deeply intelligent people are often running in many directions at once. They start a project with great excitement because the idea is fascinating, the possibility is beautiful, and then, partway through, a new idea arrives, one that is even more interesting, even more complex, even more worth exploring, and the original project gets set aside. Not from laziness, from abundance, from a mind that generates more ideas than time can hold. Psychologists who study highly gifted individuals often describe this as multi-potentiality, the condition of having genuine talent and interest across many different areas, so many that it is difficult to commit to just one. This can feel from the inside like failure. From the outside, and in the long arc of a life, it is the hallmark of a Renaissance mind.
Let me tell you about a woman named Isla. Isla was 39 years old.
She had 3 unfinished novels in a drawer, a half-completed coding course on her computer, a painted canvas leaning against the wall, abandoned at 2/3 done, a journal full of essay ideas she had never turned into essays. She called herself, with tired humor, a professional beginner. But her friend, a psychologist named Thomas, disagreed. "Isla," he said one afternoon, looking at everything she had started, "do you know what a Renaissance person is? Da Vinci never finished the majority of his projects. He was painting the Mona Lisa, designing flying machines, studying anatomy, writing music, and engineering canals all at once. His notebooks are full of things he started and didn't complete. Nobody calls Da Vinci a failure for that." Isla was quiet for a long time. Then she said, softly, "I always thought it meant I wasn't good enough to finish." "No," said Thomas, "it means your mind generates faster than your hands can keep up with. That is not a flaw, Isla. That is almost a definition of genius." Sign number 9. You are easily overwhelmed by stimulation. Do loud environments exhaust you quickly? Does too much happening at once make you want to leave the room? Do you need more recovery time after social events than most people seem to? You might have been told you're too sensitive, or you need to toughen up, or even what's wrong with you. But here is what is actually happening. Your nervous system processes information more deeply than average. It takes in more detail. It registers more data. It notices the background noise, the shifting light, the emotional temperature of the room, the subtext beneath the conversation. All of that processing costs energy. More input processed more deeply means more output required, and so you reach your limit faster than people who process less. This is not fragility. This is the cost of a highly tuned system. A more powerful engine burns more fuel. Let me tell you about a man named Milo. Milo was a musician and a composer. He was gifted beyond question. His music moved people in ways they couldn't explain. But parties, airports, busy restaurants, they cost him something real. After an hour in a noisy environment, Milo would feel physically tired, as if he had been running. For years, he thought something was wrong with him. His friends seemed to thrive in exactly the environments that drained him. Then he read about sensory processing sensitivity, the scientific term for what he was experiencing. He learned that approximately 15 to 20% of the population shares this neurological trait. He learned that it correlates strongly with creativity, empathy, and deep thinking. He learned that his nervous system was not broken, it was simply turned up. And the music he made because of it, music that reached inside people and touched something they couldn't name, was the direct product of a mind and body that felt everything, all the time, completely. The sensitivity and the genius were not separate things. They were the same thing. Sign number 10. You question everything, including yourself. We have arrived at the 10th and final sign, and I have saved it for last because it is, in many ways, the most important. You question everything, including your own beliefs, including what you thought you knew, including what you were told was true, including yourself. This is called epistemic humility, the ability to hold your own beliefs loosely enough that new evidence can change them. It is extraordinarily rare,
and it is one of the most powerful markers of genuine intelligence. Most people find their beliefs and protect them. They choose information that confirms what they already think. They avoid questions that might disturb their certainties. But you cannot stop questioning. You look at your own opinions and ask, "But am I right?" You revisit conclusions you thought were settled. You change your mind, not from weakness, but from evidence. You say without shame, "I was wrong. I understand now."
Let me tell you about a woman named Vera. Vera was a scientist. She had spent 6 years building a theory, one that her whole career was beginning to rest on. Then, at a conference in Vienna, she heard a young researcher present data that quietly undermined part of her theory. The young researcher was nervous, clearly aware that he was in a room with people who knew more than him. After the presentation, Vera walked up to him. He looked afraid, and she said, quietly, warmly, completely sincerely, "Your data is remarkable. I think you might be right, and I think I need to go back and reconsider something I've believed for 6 years." The young researcher stared at her. "Aren't you upset?" he asked. Vera smiled. "Upset? No. Excited. Because if I was wrong, that means there is more to understand, and more to understand is the best possible news there is." That willingness to be wrong, that hunger for the next layer of understanding is perhaps the most beautiful sign of all. It is the sign of a mind that loves truth more than it loves being right, and that is a very rare and very extraordinary thing to be. Let me now bring all 10 signs together, not as a checklist, not as a test, but as a portrait of the kind of mind you might be living in without fully knowing it.
The 10 genius signals. 1. You ask why more than most people. You are driven by the need to understand, not just to know. 2. You talk to yourself. Your inner dialogue is a tool for deep cognitive processing. 3. You feel things deeply. Your emotional sensitivity and your intellectual depth are the same system working together. 4. You prefer solitude. Your inner world is rich enough to be genuinely nourishing. 5. You notice what others miss. Your pattern recognition is calibrated to deeper, more complex levels. 6. You struggle with small decisions but excel at big ones. You process too thoroughly for trivial choices and exactly thoroughly enough for important ones. 7. You have a dark or unusual sense of humor. Your brain holds contradictions easily and finds truth in unexpected places. 8. You have trouble finishing things. Your idea generation runs faster than your capacity to execute, a Renaissance trait. 9. You are easily overstimulated. Your nervous system processes at a higher resolution than most. That is power, not weakness. 10. You question everything, including yourself. Your love of truth is stronger than your need to be right. Now, how many did you recognize? If you recognized 3 or more of these signals, not all of them, not perfectly, but genuinely, honestly, in your real life, then I want you to hear this. You are not ordinary. You have never been ordinary. You were simply never given the right mirror. Today, this story was your mirror. You have now completed something rare, not a quiz, not a test, a genuine encounter with your own mind. Today, you did not just learn 10 signs. You learned that intelligence is not a single narrow thing, not a test score, not a quick answer, not a confident voice. You learned that the very things you were told were problems, your sensitivity, your questions, your solitude, your unfinished projects, might be the most eloquent evidence of a genuinely extraordinary mind. You learned that doubt is not the opposite of intelligence, it is often its most faithful companion. You learned that the people who feel too much, think too much, and notice too much are not too much. They are exactly enough. More than enough.
You are not someone who missed being intelligent. You are someone who was measuring yourself with the wrong ruler. Now you have a better one. Use it. If this story helped you even 1%, subscribe to our channel right now. We are building a community here of people who believe that growing your mind and growing your English can happen in the same beautiful breath. Save this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Use each sign like a light, one small light turned on in a room you forgot was yours. Because the most important truth of this entire episode is this: genius does not announce itself. It hides in the questioner, in the feeler, in the noticer. It has been hiding in you, quietly, patiently, all along. Ask the deep questions. Feel without apology. Notice what others walk past. Think slowly and trust the answer when it comes. And most of all, recognize that the mind you have always had is more extraordinary than you were ever taught to believe. Thank you for watching. Let's grow together.